welcome to episode 4
Oh
of the
my
Through the Lens of
God,
the EMS.
Terry, I know, Terry. We are sitting here for those folks that can't watch what we're doing. We all have our Through the Lens EMS Wizard podcast backgrounds on.
Choo choo.
And Terry has a train. Unfortunately, well, it kind of looks like you're sitting on the tracks. I don't feel like this train is going to run over you, which depresses me a little bit.
I love trains. He may be keeping the train on the track.
Mm-hmm. That's what a good EMS officer does, is they keep the train from running off of the tracks.
Oh.
See how we turn that right into something EMS? Look at there. Good
I
job,
like
Terry.
it.
You fed right into that.
I'm not going to quote it, but I like it.
We didn't ask you to quote it.
Terry, why don't you tell the one question that I get text the most? I get texts a lot, and they want to know about Terry. They won't text Terry because they're scared to ask. So I told them that I would text for them. And when I say text the most, I mean Keith wants to know what makes you love trains.
I mean, they remind me of my childhood. I mean, it's one of the cool things, stuff that shapes you is I remember, man, I don't know. I guess it was before my mom got sick. We went to the B&O Railroad Museum. It was my mom, my middle brother, and we just spent the day at the Railroad Museum. And maybe she had just gotten sick. I don't really remember what it was, but it's just a couple things that remind me of those days and when family was whole. And it's a good memory, and it just, some excitement. Because we don't have trains at the beach. We got sharks at the beach.
And rip currents.
And rip currents, but no trains.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the best EMS call you had ran in your young career was someone got hit by a train. It totally destroyed them, and you was infatuated ever since then. That's what I'm telling Keith. Because what you just said was not, I'm not doing that.
Of all the calls that I ran in the 4 days that I worked in Rocky Mount, trains did not involve any of those calls. So,
well, they know how to move there in Nash and Edgecombe County. They know how to move from the trains up there. So,
what's up? Hey, Keith. No. Keith, we're doing the thing right now. I'll call you back. Cool.
Mark, do you have anything EMS?
I don't know. I was kind of interested in the whole train story. Like I'm intrigued. I feel like we've all got a train story. So yeah, we got some EMS stuff to talk about. So in the last episode, we were talking about, how we historically have always promoted the good paramedics, and that doesn't always necessarily equate to, the good leaders for our organizations. One of the thoughts I had from the last episode was how does one differentiate, promoting someone through, building a strong team, picking the right people to build that strong team versus this perception of, they got promoted just because, they friends or they cousins or whatever the thing is that, the good old boy system, right? That's why they were selected for that position. So, John, what do you think? I think we've actually talked about this one time before. Like, how do you differentiate between, the good old boy system and, a group that's actually truly trying to build the team?
Well, first of all, hurt by the jokes that Terry tells on this thing. And I just want that on record of that my feelings are hurt from all his attempts to try to slander me. With that in mind,
we're not here for your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, I would say this is that I don't think the good old boy system ever functioned with the intent to be the good old boy system. It's just what they became. For instance, if you're a person, and let's just say you've been promoted and you're the chief of the organization, and as you came up, you've already built trust with the folks that you've come up with. You've been paramedics on the truck with someone else. As you've went up through the ranks as an FTO, as a training officer, or supervisor, or what have you. You've known these people in different atmospheres a little bit differently, and you've developed a sort of trust with them and understanding, and maybe other people didn't get that opportunity simply because they wasn't on your shift. You were an A shift person, and that person was on C shift, and you worked 24/72, and you never saw them. So you never had that opportunity. So when it comes time to promote someone else, here you are looking at this person because you're familiar with them. And this is going back to a little bit of, is the process fair or is the process equal? But as they go through that and you're considering it, I think a lot of that is, who do I trust to promote somebody in that situation? And that might develop, hey, of course, John's going to pick Walter because he worked with Walter. And so that automatically is perceived by C shift, if me and Walter were on A shift, as the good old boys, because I picked my guy, when actually I picked the person that I trust, that I know can do the functionality of a job. And then Walter picks his guy, Terry. And then Terry picks his guy, Mark. And next thing you know, you didn't mean to, but you've created the good old boy network. But you just picked people that you trusted to do the job. And I believe that's how most good old boy systems developed. And those people, they sort of just live in that world until they see that changeover takes place. Terry, you've lived a different life than me, so you say that. You may say that differently.
No, I think it's also, this person reminds me of me, and so that good old boy becomes, I like this person, or maybe we've run some bad calls, or sometimes it's that they give me that affirmations, and I think by it's very nature, and some people would joke that here we've got 4 white guys talking about this. That good old boy system means diversity, and you eliminate diversity because somebody either looks differently than you or has some different experiences than you. And that's what I would say. Some of the people that I've worked closest with in my career. So whether that's Mark, whether that's Walter, whether that's you, buddy of mine, Cole Yates, who I worked with doing some technical rescue stuff. Cole and I had very different backgrounds with things, and we would approach problems from a radically different viewpoint, but we would always arrive at the same conclusion. And that was one of the awesome things, is that our different experiences, but we still arrived at that same conclusion point.
I think the good old boy club, like John said, didn't mean to be that way. But why do I want to promote someone in my organization that doesn't agree with the organization? So I promoted Terry, per se, because Terry had the same thoughts, process, and vision for the organization that I have. So I promoted Terry at that point. And I think that's where it, we've always heard, say before, we're going to have difference in opinions. We're going to agree differently, but we have to go out of the room agreeing to the same opinion that we all agreed to. And, I think, why would I want to bring somebody in that is going to go out and say that tear the organization down or tear it apart? But I think the way that you can handle that is by, bringing other people in your organization to be able to affirm what you've thought or affirm what you've had. So, if you're running an interview process or you're running a promotional process, bring some of the other people in that can help with that. Then what that ends up saying is, you had other ears and eyes to be able to see, and these were the better positions. And sometimes you may have that individual that says, you know what, they brought something out good that I didn't realize that were in them, and brought up something bad that they did in this process that I didn't realize. And the person that I may have chosen may not have been the right one for that position, but we chose someone else. Does that make sense? So not always, you may see something different. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, so I kind of relate a lot of this back to, a lot of my original training after high school was in music and music education. So I think of this as, you have this orchestra, you have this band, and they're all playing from sheet music. And if you're not all playing from the same song, from the same sheet music, everybody's playing different notes, different rhythms, different things, and it's just going to sound terrible, right? But whenever everybody's playing from the same sheet of music, everything's working together. So now I have a strong team that's built, right? So, you were talking about, Walter, making sure that, these individuals understand we're on the same page with the mission of the agency, the goals, the vision, the values of the agency. If we all understand that, we're all playing from that same sheet of music, now we have this diverse group that we can pick from for this promotional process, versus just those that just happen to have some similar background, similar experiences that might have that same understanding of the mission and vision and the values of the agency, so to make that person appear more valuable to be selected for that position, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is, we have to set our people up to be playing from the same sheet of music at the end of the day.
You mean kind of like following the locomotive in Terry's train?
That's right. You gotta have a locomotive that's, sometimes it's pulling, sometimes it's pushing, sometimes it's in the middle. But if you just have a bunch of train cars with no locomotive, then that jams you all up. So, Mark, you had said this. So what makes somebody attractive when you're doing this? When you're doing this process, what are some of the things that you might be looking for, and some of the processes that you've participated in and sat on? What are some things that you've looked at?
So yeah, just looking at the individual, during the assessment, it depends on what phase of the process that we're kind of looking at, right? Like, so if we're looking at hiring a training officer, what we want to evaluate that individual in a classroom delivering a lecture, doing something, right? It's not just going to be just a interview, right? So we're still going to do the interview, but we're going to need to kind of drill in that assessment into that position, right? So if it's a shift supervisor kind of thing, one of the things that we've done was to put the candidate in a room with somebody that we brought in, that we kind of coached, hey, this is how you're going to communicate, and to have them verbally work through this whole conflict resolution process with the individual for them to be assessed for their supervisor position, right, that they were being hired for. So I think there's a lot of things to kind of look at.
Just piggybacking off what you said, I look at, and I'm going to answer a little bit of what Terry asked. I'm just going to jump in on this and say, I'm looking at passion. Do you feel it? We mentioned something in our program about doing scenarios, as to be a paramedic, to be an EMT, you're going to go through a technical scope of practice in the state of North Carolina. This is what we're going to review. And every agency does something similar to this. I haven't met one that doesn't necessarily do some evaluation. Some of it's skill-based. Some of it is just like, hey, show me the skill, or some of it's a scenario. It could be medical, it could be trauma. But what we tend to not do is train people or put them through scenarios of, here you go. You talked about actors of here's a scenario. Now go out there and manage this particular scenario. Now, I'm not talking about an MCI. I'm talking about, just a simple conversation someone has to have with a person, and then evaluate how they have that conversation, evaluate how they've had, how they're going to deal with conflict, something, and then see how someone utilizes policy, or they utilize their experience in answering those type of questions. And Terry, I know that you've sat on there and seen and utilized this before. Is that not what you're looking for? Is those type of interactions?
Well, like the background, it's about that training. And just because you got that train behind you, do you know how to drive that train? Do you know how to use it? Hey, there's something on the tracks up ahead. There's a tractor trailer full of gasoline. And so if you don't know how to make that application and driving that train and stop that train, then you've just created a huge explosion.
So the next thing, we've kind of touched on a little bit. So, say we've we've really worked with this person to kind of shape and mold them to become the thing that, really fits with the agency to be eligible for a promotion. We've motivated them, we've inspired them, we've done everything, and they've entered the process and they've completed the process and everything's gone great. And then they're not selected. Someone else is picked for that position. So what do we do for that individual? How do we continue to lead that individual that has now been, taking a serious blow to their career, right? So what do you think, Walter?
So, I think, one of the things that some agencies do is they actually give some feedback once a promotional process, or, even if the agency does not do so, maybe kudos to the individual that went back to the agency head, the chief or the assistant chief or whoever was running that process to say, hey, can you give me some pointers or some information, some positives, some negatives? What can I do to be able to, better myself? And, people think it's corny. I always think it was good when I always received letters and emails back. Hey, thanks for letting me go through this process. I look forward to, people say, oh, that's just corny. They're just doing, no, they're just trying to get some feedback as well. But I think with the feedback they're provided, we have to be able to try to figure out how to mentor that individual, especially if we want them to move up. We have to figure out how to mentor them and help them achieve their goals, because that's one of our jobs as a leader, is to be able to help those people achieve the goals that they have. So how do we mentor them? Terry, John, either one?
I mean, one of the most frustrating promotional processes I went through, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. And after the process, I sat down with 2 or 3 of the folks that were on that panel, and I said, hey, what, from your perspective, I look up to you as a leader, look up to you as a role model and mentor, and what are some things that you would suggest? What is your feedback for me? And one of the most frustrating things was hearing just be you, just continue, and then that's no feedback. It's frustrating because you hear absolutely nothing. And so sitting down, and sometimes it's not that you're a bad candidate. Maybe sometimes that there's somebody who is a better candidate. But having that conversation, whether you're the leader or whether you're that person who went through that process. And one of the hard parts in this is you have to have an open mind to say, hey, this is the lens that these people are looking at me through, and recognizing that feedback. Your feelings might be hurt a little bit, but working with that person. John, what are your thoughts?
If you don't give them feedback, how do you expect them to get better?
Amen.
So if you're just, if you're just going to let them go through a process and they're let's take the different approach. They're actually horrible at it. They're the worst ever or whatnot. And you didn't have anything that disqualified them to not put them through. So you did put them through there. And it's still your responsibility as a manager to go back and say, these are the things you suck at, because this gives them that feedback to say, okay, so let me decide for myself based on feedback that I've given, whether this is something I want to pursue, therefore develop passion for it, because let me tell you, if there's a lieutenant position, and I'm using a lieutenant just in general, if there's like a lieutenant position open and somebody comes through and they suck at it, the interview, and then I go back and I tell them, hey, these are the list of things that you sucked at that you need to improve on. And then inevitably another lieutenant position comes open and they come through it. You don't think I'm going to be able to tell a difference in whether or not they improved?
That reflection.
Right. That's the point I was getting to, is that paramedics, EMS folks are reflective learners, and we're reflective based on our performance. And if I go and perform in an interview, and I've been through an interview once or twice in my career, if I go through an interview and I get
30 or 40
and I get feedback,
I think it's 26 because John Wilson has
26, 27.
Yeah, 26 1-year pins, and I have one 26-year pin. But
Yeah. But if you get that feedback that says, hey, this is what you need to improve on. And I say, I don't want to do that. Then that's going to tell me one thing. That's going to tell you as the manager something. That's going to say, hey, they really didn't want it. They didn't like being told. They couldn't take that being critiqued. They couldn't take it. And so they probably wasn't going to be a good manager to begin with. But that reflective learner, if they don't get that information, then they have nothing to reflect on. All they have is what they think is, oh, you promoted Mark. Well, Mark, and I'm going to start picking out all the things wrong with Mark, because if there's one thing EMS people can do is we can pick out what's wrong with every damn thing out there. That's just who we are. We're going to be able to do that. We judge, we're usually accurate about it, and we're sarcastic, and we're negatively motivated, and we're going to tell you what's wrong. That's what we're trained to do. Find out what's wrong.
But that's human nature too. Same thing, human nature with that as well. We're all human nature, negative over positive. So, we always do that.
You say human nature, and I say, Walter, you're different. You know why? Because you're straight out of high school EMS. Straight out of high school EMS. And I mean, so what life did you have? I mean, it's been EMS your whole life. You're what, third generation?
Terry,
Are you third generation?
Terry, what is he going with this?
I don't know.
Listen,
I'm
hear
the
me
same
out.
thing.
Hear me out, though. The little Tyrannosaurus Rex eggs were hatching, and out walks Walter's grandfather, right, who creates EMS and spoke it. This is right after the flood, and creates EMS, and then Walter's got this history behind him. So I'm going to say I've met some positive people that don't do EMS, and they're just positive. And we, Walter Allen Meads, trains people to respond to negativity, because if you don't, you're going to make bad paramedics. That's what you have to do. You don't sit there and say, here's a great TSOP with nothing wrong with them, and you get to refusal. You got to give them something they're going to be like, oh my God, there's something wrong here. That's why they
take offense.
Well, I don't think we can blame Walter on that.
Take
Just
offense.
by himself.
We can always blame Walter. I sell T-shirts.
We can.
We can blame. It says blame Walter on the front of it. We're going to print that one next. Yes. Blame Walter.
hashtag blame Walter. But John, before we move on from this something that Mark had said kind of stirred this in my mind. So let's take one of these 90-degree right-hand turns for the shiny object. In your 26, or maybe it's 27 interviews or non-interviews, whatever it is, what was one thing that surprised you the most? That you said, I didn't expect this question, or this caught you off guard, because you are one of these people who you want to find out about this agency. You want to understand. You'll talk with who was the last person that did this job, or somebody that does that job similar. So what's something that caught you, I say by surprise, I don't know if that's the right term, but you know where I'm going with that.
And to correct you, it's 26 jobs that I got. It's 180 interviews that I did.
Oh, I forgot, because it's interviews sometimes. I just want to see what it's like. Nah.
No,
I ain't really going to do this job anyways.
I'm gonna I would say that something that makes me have to go back and think, that makes me surprised. And I've gotten questions that I have went back to utilize for different reasons they were asked. I remember one that would ask, if you were an animal, what would it be and why? And I think this was before Google, so they didn't Google this one, although now you can Google stupid ass questions I would ask in an interview to see what they would say in a particular situation. But it made me ask myself, what were they considering in that, and why did that matter? There was another question of there's a billboard on the side of the road on this highway. How much traffic does it see? And I think, to me, are they looking at, do you know the population of the area? Can you do those things or whatnot? And that's how I rationalize that. I never knew the reason why maybe someone would ask that question for that particular job or whatnot. So those are just an example of a couple of questions that had been asked that made me think. I will say that I probably got feedback on an interview 10% of the time. 90% of the time, you got zero feedback. And here's the thing is, I don't know if that's the legal part of EMS world that says, hey, don't talk to applicants. I feel human resources says those things is you can't talk to the applicant at that. And so I kind of get that, but I put that whole what Walter said about it. EMS is a little different kind of thing. And so we you get into this world of we're a little different. So there's a little bit of push pull that happens inside of that. But Walter, I'm actually interested. You dissect things probably a little bit. We're going to cut the frog open. I've talked to Mark enough. I know Terry enough. We're going to cut the frog open. And if the job is just to cut the frog open to see what's on the inside, that's what we're going to do. But you're going to pull out every little piece of organ and say, let's see look how little this thing is. How would you dissect that interview?
To be clear, I don't know if Walter interviews as much as places come to him and say, we want you to work for us. And that's a different lens.
Sure, but being on the panels, he dissects the questions that are being asked.
True. Okay.
What do you see, Walter? The long pause is Walter looking up in the air and thinking to himself, I don't know.
What did you just ask me?
Pretty weighted question.
He wasn't listening.
Do what? Yeah. Can you repeat the question? There's been some crazy questions, and sometimes, you do ask, what is the purpose of the question? But, I've been in some interviews that you could tell, and it's different when you are applying for an EMT position coming into the organization and applying for a leadership position in the organization. And if you're internal or external. So, I can see, how many, John, you said 10% of the time. How many times did you actually maybe even not even get anything back to say, thank you for applying, you didn't get selected for this position? I bet you more times than none that you probably didn't even get a letter back saying that, you weren't selected for this position.
I'm still waiting on 10 of them right now.
See, so that's what I'm saying. So I think, as EMS and leadership, we have a little bit of different role. And, I'll pick on Mark and Terry for just a minute because they're in an organization actually. So, when John, we're in a more educational role with that. So it's a little different for us. But, when you're having somebody go up for a promotion as a leader, they're internally anyway. You see them every day. You deal with them every day. You watch them go through this promotional process. You know that their desire is to advance to be something, whether it's a paramedic position or a leadership position. I think that's the ones that you can impact the most. I think it is a little bit harder when you are outside of the organization to be able to provide some of that feedback, but internal in the organization, you can give that feedback very easily. And, those questions, sometimes those questions, I think they do, what are they asking about an animal? Well, why are they asking, what kind of animal would you be? Are they trying to see if you're going to be a hard nose or a soft nose or what type of, based on an animal, and I'm sure, like you said, not from Google, but now you can probably Google it to say, if John said he was going to be a tiger, what type of individual does that make him be?
Platypus. I would be a platypus.
A platypus. There you go. So, yeah, I don't,
I actually remember, I remember an interview process I sat in on in an adjacent agency. And one of the questions that they actually had us, prompted to ask it was actually a scenario-based question. So you're on the scene, you're helping Nana out the floor. She's uninjured. You're getting refusal. You're walking out of the house and you hear something in the chest freezer before you walk out of the house. And then you hear it again and you're compelled to open the freezer door and you find a penguin. in the freezer.
Seems legit.
What do you do?
It's where penguins live. Why would you?
What
why
do
would
you
pull
do?
it out?
But you just close the lid and leave?
I would really, really quickly, I would do a 15-second reel sponsoring the podcast, because when am I going to see a penguin again that close?
This is true. My
not
daughter
a bad
loves
idea.
penguins, so I would probably take a picture with it. I'd selfie with it, be like, "Hey, hashtag baby Kaylee, I found a penguin. Would you like to adopt it?"
Can you put the penguin with the helicopter?
Maybe with the train.
Yeah, well, maybe with the train. There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Penguins can't breathe in helicopters, can they?
I
The
don't.
atmosphere changes.
I mean, it's got to
What
be
if-
cold. They got to
what
be
would the-
cold.
What would a penguin do in a rip current?
Get eaten by a shark
I mean,
Yeah.
if they're at the Outer Banks.
Yes.
see, here y'all go again. Y'all get derailed. That's why Terry's sitting in front of the train to try to keep
Derailed.
on the track, because y'all get derailed.
Mm-hmm. Mark, bring us back on track. See what I'm doing there.
So
So what-
on track, all of
Yeah.
the train puns and
Yeah.
all. So yeah, I mean,
I'm
that
a
was just, I
funny
thought that was an
guy.
interesting question to ask, because are you the person that just closes the lid, walks away, leaves it alone? Do you offer to check out the penguin? Are they okay? Do you just ask about the penguin? Do you call animal services? Do you try to render aid? Do you, all the different things? That first initial response they would give, this very unusual question, would kind of tell the crew or the interview panel what some of their initial nature is to do. Are they going to be compassionate? They want to check on the penguin to take care of them, or are they going to be more? I don't know about this. Slam the lid. I'm out. I'm done. I work hard here for the penguin. I'm done. Right. So you can kind
Not
of
my
get a
job.
little bit of that about them. Right. Not my job. That's right. That's right.
Penguins get a bad rap, I feel.
Have you ever looked inside the mouth of a penguin? It is nightmare fuel.
What are you doing
Penguins
inside
look.
the mouth of a penguin?
Walter, what?
Walter, have you looked into the mouth of a penguin?
I try to feed a penguin last weekend, and the sucker spit the fish out and played with it on the ground. I don't have no use for a penguin right now. He did not like with the fish that we were feeding him.
So this was a Meads penguin. Very curious about what the type of fish it would
No,
eat.
it was an African penguin, I may add, in the safari park in Virginia.
Why would a penguin be in a safari? I mean, y'all got to put this guy. I've got to Google this in a second.
African penguins. African penguins.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look that one
They're
up.
not cold natured like Antarctica penguins. They're warm natured.
But it's still a penguin.
It's still a penguin.
Does it look like a regular penguin?
It does.
Except it doesn't eat your
I'm
fish.
finding a picture
Doesn't
of one
like
of
my
these.
fish.
And I'm going to make that your background, Walter.
We are in
you will.
search for a mascot. I am thinking African penguin is at the top of the list right now. Maybe we should poll the listeners to vote on what our mascot should be for the podcast, and if they like the idea of the African penguin.
Don't vote for the penguin.
The
I
African
like it.
penguin.
Yeah,
Platypus.
Choo
shark.
choo.
Shark.
Platypus.
Shark
The
or
platypus we
platypus.
brought up tonight. Yep. See?
We got 4 choices.
That sounds like something they need to hashtag to us and let us know. Put it in the comments, of
Yeah.
yeah, and let's hear. Let's make this the thing.
See what kind of feedback.
That's that reminder too to like us, to follow us, smash that follow button, and make sure and give your comments.
And you don't have to like all of us. You just some of us maybe. If you like all of us.
You have to like 2/3 of us at least.
There's 4
so-
of us.
So me
It
and
works, yeah.
someone else.
There's 4 of us here. How's that 2/3? There's no match.
I'm married into math.
His wife did not teach him math. That's evidence.
I'm married into math.
So am I.
Needs a tutor.